What's up guys, Steve Chen here, welcome back to my channel. 6 horsepower Tohatsu Outboard 2022 model. In this video, I'll briefly talk about why I chose this model, what I like and dislike about it, and some tips and precautions. Let's get started. First, let's see what we get from the package. External gas tank, 3.1 gallon. The gas pipe, spare parts, the rope here, spark plug and the pin. A toolkit that includes the tools you need to service or troubleshoot the motor, screwdriver, 2 sockets and a plier. I forgot to mention this piece, very important, the spare kill switch. Always great to put it somewhere in your boat, just in case you lose the original piece. By the way, this is not the right way to place it when you're operating the outboard, because if you, for some reason, fall out of the boat, the motor is still running and you have no way of getting back on your boat. Instead, you should place it somewhere else, like attached to yourself. I usually do it this way. I wrap it around my wrist, and in case I fall out of the boat, as you can see here, I will just pull it so it stops. I can get back on the boat. That's for safety consideration. So why I chose the Tohatsu 6 horsepower outboard with external tank only? First, why Tohatsu? Many of my friends who used Tohatsu before recommend it to me. They say it runs smoothly, quietly, and it starts always at the first or second pull, which is great. I had a chance to use one of my friends' 3.5 horsepower outboard and I really enjoyed it. So I think, why don't I get a same brand motor for myself? I heard that Tohatsu makes all the small outboards in the United States that is less than 10 horsepower. Not sure if that is real or not. And I know a really good local dealer who sells Tohatsu outboards only, and I have access to all the different horsepower I need. After taking a look at the specs, I found out that from 4 horsepower to 6 horsepower is about the same weight. So why don't I get the most powerful one? Previously, I had a 2.3 horsepower Honda outboard. I found it's not powerful enough to drive the boat. If I have like 2 people, including myself, on the 12-foot aluminum boat with a 52-inch beam and all the gears on board, it can only go up to 5-6 miles per hour. Too slow for me. And that's why I don't want to have the 2.5 horsepower Tohatsu. And that's why I chose the 6 horsepower Tohatsu. And last question is, why external tank only? For this 6 horsepower outboard, you have 2 options. You have the dual tank option, which means you have the internal tank here and you have the connector to connect you to the external tank. And I'm choosing the external tank only because, first, I like the appearance. Without the internal tank, it looks better to me, and it's simpler. First, you don't have the valve here, because if you have the internal one, you are having a valve here that you can choose internal, external or off position for the gas intake. And without the internal tank, you can see inside, this position used to hold the internal tank. Now it's empty, so I think it's not a bad thing. And in addition to that, I have some other reasons why I like the external tank only. That's related with the use of the motor and my tips. That's related with the gas. So let's briefly talk about that. So for the internal tank, the gas, you are not always using it up every trip. So you have some leftover gas in the tank, which is not great. The gas, even with the 93, is only good for 4 to 6 weeks. I mean shelf life. So it's not easy to drain the internal tank. You can drain it for sure if you disconnect the pipe or you drain it from the carburetor. That's not great. With the external tank, it's much easier. You just disconnect it here and let it run through the motor, and that's it. So one of the tips I learned from the dealer is you always want to disconnect the pipe after each use before you get on to the bank. That means you want to disconnect it while you are still using it and let it burn all the gas inside the pipe and the carburetor. You always want to keep the outboard inside dry, because the gas is not great. It contains 10% ethanol, which absorbs all water or moisture, which is detrimental to the outboard. And let's talk about some other tips I have. In the menu, it says you can use 87 or 91 unleaded gas with up to 10% ethanol. What I learned from the dealer is only use the 93, because the 93, like we said before, has longer shelf life of 4 to 6 weeks, which makes it better for use. You can put some stabilizer inside. I'm not a big fan of that, so what I usually do is use the gas as much as possible, and after it's sitting there for 6 weeks, I use the gas funnel to put it in my car. And I think the bigger engine or motor for the car is capable of handling the gas, I mean older gas. Let's talk about some designs I really like. First, the gear is in front of the motor, which makes it easier to change the gear front, neutral and rear. And it's pretty easy, you can hear it. And second, the oil light indicator. That's great, because it keeps monitoring the oil pressure. Once you have insufficient oil, it's gonna light up and you can tell you have oil problem. And if you are driving the motor like on the water, you see the light up, red light, and you should stop it and let it rest, let it cool down, and start it again every once in a while, so you can get back to the bank safely without damaging the motor. This is a great feature. And some other features I really like is it has a hole here. So what I recommend is you have a rope and a clipper, so when you're on the water, just make sure you have it connected to your boat, just in case something really bad happens. It has 2 handles, front and back, which is great. Makes it easier to handle. Like even with myself, I can do it pretty easily. Lift it up vertically and place it horizontally into my car's trunk. So I will show you later how I do it. And one of the great designs is the position it can be stored. Like instead of the vertical position, which is the best, you can store it like almost horizontally on this side, and the other side. The only side you cannot store it on is the black handle part. You don't want it to go that way. That's not the way to go. All the other 3 positions, you're good. So one of the things I like is the positions it has, or the design. First, we have the shallow water position. You have to go to forward gear to get to that position. It's very simple, just leave it up. You hear that sound? That's the shallow water position. Then see where it is. And if you want to drop it back, it's very simple. Just leave it up and you hear that sound, the second click, and drop it back in to the original position. And if you want to have it all the way up tilted, just lift it up until you hear 3 clicks. First, second, and the third. Now it's good. And if you want to drop it back, you take a look at here. You want to pull it up by this handle and then you drop it. As simple as that. So it's great. Sometimes I go really shallow. This is very helpful. Now let's talk about how to start it and some tips related to starting the motor. First, you want to connect the pipe to the external tank. Pull it here and plug it in. Open the vent counterclockwise about 2 turns and connect the pipe here. You want to make sure always metal to metal, so make sure it's the right position or direction. And once you connect it, give it a few squeeze until you feel the bulb is like not as soft as before. That means you prime the carburetor well, and then you put the kill switch in position. Make sure you pull the choke and the gear is in neutral position. It has a protection. If you have the gear at forward, you cannot pull it. Always make sure you have it at neutral, and then you adjust the valve here. Like, don't start at the start position, it's not enough fuel or gas. Always start at the restart position, and you give it a pull or two, it should start immediately when it's cold. And once it's started, push the choke back in, and in that way you have more air to burn the gas. What I found out is when the outboard is warm, you always want to restart in between the restart position and the turtle position. That's the best position I found out for my outboard. Always start first or second pull. And for sometimes, like you forgot the kill switch or you forgot to pull the choke, you pull it a few times, you have more gas into the cylinder than you need. That's called a flooded condition. If that happens, what you want to do is to have the full throttle here, and you give it a pull and adjust it back to the idling position. In that way, you burn the excessive gas in the cylinder and you're good to go. And when you're done for the day, what I usually do is put the throttle in between the restart and turtle position, and you disconnect the pipe. You run without the external gas tank. In that way, you burn the gas inside the pipe and carburetor, makes the outboard dry. I mentioned it once before. I want to re-emphasize that. It's very important. And if you are not using it for a long time, I would recommend you open it up and you drain the carburetor here. This is the carburetor drain. You use the screwdriver to open it counterclockwise, and you drain the whole gas inside the carburetor. And after you drain all the gas, you tighten it. Once you feel some friction, you turn it a little bit, like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock position, or 20 degree if you call it in the degree unit. That way you tighten the screw, but you don't want to over tighten it. And when you are transporting the gas tank, make sure you unplug it here and you close the valve. That's very important. And for refueling the gas tank, you see it here. You first open it a little bit, press it here, then you can open it. And once you finish, you close the cap until you hear the click and close it. You don't need the filter. Somebody use the paper filter when you refuel the gas tank. You don't have to do it because there's a filter inside the outboard, and once in a while you change the filter. And let's talk about the maintenance. Like after every season, you want to do the following: change the engine oil, filter, check the spark plug and the gear oil. I think that's it for maintenance. This outboard is designed to be portable, which means you can lift it up and place it in your trunk if you want, but you don't have to. The reason I'm doing that is because I don't want to put too much pressure on the transom or on the trailer, because I have a small boat and trailer. Let me show you how I do it. This outboard weighs 56 pounds and I weigh less than 150 pounds. If I can do it easily, you guys can do it as well. Lift it up. Propeller side first. As you can see, it's not very difficult. I placed a toolbox and cover it with a towel so I can protect the painting. And you always want to have the propeller side lower than the cylinder side so the engine oil don't go inside. That's something you don't want. And I believe taking it out is easier. Let me show you. Oh, too high. Okay. Now it's back in position. Now let's talk about the one thing I don't like about this motor or outboard. It's the painting. Don't get me wrong, the color looks great, the white color. I like it so much. It's about the quality of the coating. It's not strong enough. You can see some peeling off a scratch here, and here already covered with some other painting. I really hope they use better painting that is stronger. It's not a big deal. I can still use it pretty well. I think that's it for today's video, and let's see how it performs on water.